Astron 6 was formed in 2007 by 5 friends: Matthew Kennedy, Adam Brooks, Connor Sweeney, Jeremy Gillespie, and Stephen Kostansky. Astron 6 was intentionally named to evoke thoughts of the old VHS distributors of the 1980s, most specifically Vestron. They met at the Winnipeg Short Film Massacre in the mid-2000s and hit it off almost immediately. Each one had a different background and expertise, but all of them had a love of cinema. The group worked together to make 3 short films in the summer of 2007, H.I.Z., Insanophenia, and Sebastian and Alan, all of which they entered into the Winnipeg Short Film Massacre. Wanting to make a full feature, in 2008 they started working on the sci-fi action comedy Manborg. While Stephen Kostansky continued to work on post-production for Manborg, the group kept making short films. They also started working on their next feature, the horror revenge comedy Father's Day. Because of all the post-work Manborg needed, it wasn't finished until 2011. They premiered it at Fantastic Fest. Manborg was both a parody and an homage to 80s genre films. It was loaded with intentionally silly dialogue, cheesy effects, and ridiculous action sequences. It was all these things years before Kung Fury on a fraction of the budget. Manborg played at various film festivals and was a major hit with audiences. It was an official selection at both Fantastic Fest and Toronto After Dark. It later won Best Feature at the Boston Underground Film Festival. Numerous industry folks adored it as well. Jason Eisner, Eli Roth, and Don Coscarelli all tweeted about their love of the film. Father's Day didn't require nearly as much post-work, so roughly a month later, Astron 6 premiered the film at Toronto After Dark, where it won Best Hero, Best Poster, and Best Film. Father's Day was obviously low budget, but it stunned most people when they found out it cost only $10,000. It was nothing short of miraculous what they were able to do with so little. While editing Father's Day, Adam Brooks commented that he was losing his mind and suggested they make a film about an editor that was losing his mind. Shortly after that, they were asked if they wanted to take place in an art show called If They Came From Within, about Canadian horror films that didn't exist. They jumped at the opportunity and told them their idea for the editor. As part of the art show, each entry was able to pick an artist to make a poster for their fake movie. They chose Justin Erickson, who made a wonderfully bloody piece of art for the film that didn't exist. Yet, when the group saw this, they loved it, and since they now had a free poster, they knew they had to make this into their next full-length feature. Their initial plan was to make a fake 2-minute trailer they could use to apply for telefilm funding. The idea was that they could take whatever they shot and reuse it if they were able to secure financing. They wrote the first draft of the script in 2 weeks. They had to rush it because in order to apply for the micro-budget grant, they needed to apply with a feature-length script. The script was written as a parody homage to classic Italian Giallo films, as well as cosmic horror films like The Beyond. It revolved around an editor losing his sanity and dealing with everything from an unfaithful wife to a bizarre series of murders. They shot as much for as cheaply as they could using old DSLR cameras. Matt Kennedy was a student at UBC, and in order to apply for the telefilm micro-budget grant, your project had to be submitted through a juried institution, such as UBC. At the time, his teacher was producer-director Rachel Talalay. Both Talalay and Sharon McGowan at UBC helped them to get their grant, which was about $120,000. They were given $90,000 up front and would be given the remainder upon the delivery of the finished film. With all this money, they decided to make the editor bigger and better than they first conceived. They knew what they could do with $10,000, just imagine what they could do with $90,000. The original idea was to take the footage they had already shot for the fake trailer and use it in the feature. They shot the footage with a DSLR camera, and now since they had all these additional funds, they decided to scrap that footage and shoot new footage with a Red One digital camera. The Astron 6 group all settled into their various roles: acting, directing, effects, and so forth. They knew many talented people as well, who they brought in for the shoot. Dan Byrne and filmmaker John Pays are 2 major heroes of Brooks that he shoehorned into the movie. The poster for John Pays' film Crime Wave also appears throughout the film, because they all love Crime Wave. They were able to hire greats like Jerry Wasserman and Udo Kier. Kier had to read the script twice because the first time perplexed him, but he knew he enjoyed it. Reading it a second time reassured him that this was something he wanted to be a part of. Jerry Wasserman also believed in the film so much, he became a co-producer. The guy saw actress Tristan Risk in the horror film American Mary. Since they were friends with the director duo the Soska sisters, they got in touch with her through them and hired her for the film. Risk told them she does a fire act, so they wrote that into the opening of the movie. They hired MMA fighter Lance Cartwright to play Cesare. They were friends with actress Samantha Hill, who they hired to play Bella. She was on Broadway performing Les Miserables at the time. Rounding out the cast was Paz de la Huerta, who just finished working on Boardwalk Empire. Adam Brooks, Matthew Kennedy, and Connor Sweeney all had major parts in the film. On top of that, Adam and Matt were going to co-direct. Jeremy Gillespie would be handling some of the music, and Stephen Kostanski would be doing the effects. They also hired Claudio Simonetti to do the opening song. His band Goblins scored many famous giallos. For some additional effects, Adam contacted Aftermath FX Studio. Initially, they contacted them about making a breathing beta tape, which expanded into them needing other props. They also hired Emerson Ziffel to create additional props and do some of the effects. They didn't have a budget for CG, so they wanted to keep it practical and do as many effects in camera as possible. Adam Brooks sent actor Lawrence Harvey a Facebook message about how they met at a horror convention and asked if he remembered him. Harvey's most notably known for being in The Human Centipede 2. Brooks told him where he was from and how they wanted to hire him for the editor. Harvey was interested, and after reading the script, he agreed to join and play the part of Father Clark. They rented some studio space in a warehouse where they could build their sets. Connor Sweeney and Matthew Kennedy's parents were very supportive and built and painted many of the sets for the film. Since the movie was supposed to look like the Italian films of the 70s, they painted the sets to look like something straight out of the 70s. Before principal photography, they shot a quick cameo with Dan Byrne as Fantori one afternoon in July of 2013. Filming began in mid-2013 in Winnipeg and Kenora, Canada. When Udo Kier was on set, they all tried to get him to share some stories about his time working on the legendary Giallo classic Suspiria. With the scope of the film now being larger than they were used to, they hired some additional crew. The group didn't want the film to look too Canadian, so they hired some crew members they found on the internet. This proved to be a mistake. The Astron 6 group was used to moving quickly, and the group they hired was very slow. So on most days, the first half of the day was wasted on setup, and then they'd end up shooting half of what they planned. They filmed some scenes, but overall, they weren't happy. Things were off to a rocky start. They filmed a scene for the opening where actress Tristan Risk has a tarantula crawling across her naked body. At one point, the spider was just some glued together Q-tips. They did the scene and the actress didn't complain once. It wasn't until the next day they discovered she's arachnophobic, so her clenching up in terror is real. Filming went along for about 9 days when things came to an abrupt halt. They discovered they had officially run out of money. The person they hired to handle production costs spent over $110,000 when they only had $90,000 in the bank. So they had to apply for lines of credit and borrow enough to fill in that $20,000 hole. Morale was low. They looked over what they had, and out of 148 scenes, they only had about 20 shot. They examined their script and decided what they did and didn't need. They came to the conclusion that they had about 20% of the film. Now they had to figure out how to do the other 80%. They called the 20% they had in the can Block 1. They decided they'd go old school and do things the way they did on Father's Day, which was to do everything themselves.
So what's the plan next then?
Father's Day style, probably.
They immediately let the entire film crew go. They then promoted their one-time PA Alex McClellan to first AD. The new crew was Adam Brooks, Matt Kennedy, Alex McClellan, and whatever actor they were working with that day. On days when they needed sound, they brought in their friend Kevin Bacon. As a way to get some additional funds to help with the production, they did a crowdfunding campaign on Indiegogo. They were also able to secure another grant, this time from Manitoba Film and Music. The Lake of the Woods Brewing Company co-sponsored the film. They gave them free hotel rooms to stay in for part of the shoot in exchange for having their logo prominently shown in the film. Then they maxed out all their credit cards. This gave them the additional boost they needed to shoot the rest of the film. The extras for the film were all either family or friends, which they kept since they could get away with not paying them. The guys weren't full-time filmmakers, so to complete the film, they had to do their day jobs during the week and then shoot what they could over the weekend. Needless to say, this made the shoot stretch on for much longer than they anticipated. Emerson left after Block 1 to do the effects for the comedy horror film Wolf Cop. He left the group with a few props that they could use for Block 2. The props he left were irreplaceable because they couldn't afford to have any more built. They had 3 fake knives they needed to use in the film. Paz broke one while filming, which was okay. Then she broke another one. They had only one left, so they babied it and kept it away from Paz. Their friend Jen Kowalchuk was their go-to girl. When they needed someone in the background, they got Jen. When they needed a body double for Paz or Sam, they called Jen. Even when they needed to light someone on fire, they called Jen. Brooks said she's truly fearless, and he's in awe of her. Speaking of, they needed fire retardant gel for some of the burns they wanted to do in the film. They contacted a few places, but no matter what they tried, they couldn't get any of them to sell to them. most likely because they didn't have an official stunt coordinator on board, or because they couldn't afford to have a fire marshal on set every time they wanted to do a burn. This of course didn't stop them. Since they couldn't buy any, they made their own. When Paz is lit on fire at the end, that wasn't CG. They did indeed cover Jen Kowalczyk in fire gel and set her ablaze. Brooks took a cast of Paz's head and mailed the life cast to Aftermath Effects so they could create a mold to melt her face off. About halfway through the production, they discovered actress Sheila Campbell. They hired her to play Porphyry's wife, Marguerite. Campbell just so happened to own the exact type of dog they wanted her character to have in the movie, so he ended up acting with her. The editor was at times a movie inside a movie. Often there would be scenes from a Giallo film that the editor would be working on. There were times where the editor realized that he was in the movie. They hired artist Graham Humphreys to do some additional posters for use in the backgrounds at the studio. He created numerous posters for fake Giallo films, many of which were homages to ones that did exist. They had two kinds of blood for the film: fake orangey-looking blood for the Giallo film inside a film, and a more realistic red-looking one for when it was the real world. Stephen Kostanski took a cast of Brooks's hand and molded out fingers. He was then able to animate them via stop motion for a scene later in the film. The church confessional was just one wall in between the two actors, not a booth. This scene was shot in Matt's parents' backyard. They couldn't afford a rain machine, so one of the crew stayed out of frame and sprayed them with the hose. When the cop feeds the fingers to the dog, they're really cookies made out of peanut butter and shaped to look like fingers. The film was an homage to numerous Giallos, everything from Tenebrae to Murder Rock to The Strange Vice of Mrs. Ward. They also threw in stuff from their childhood, like an homage to Weird Science, which is what inspired them to put Risk in the underpants from the film. The hidden camera footage was an homage to Dress to Kill. The book Three Mothers is an homage to the works of Dario Argento. Ray escaping the editing deck was an homage to Videodrome. The scene with Ray walking down the road is an homage to Hitchhike, right down to his character's costume, hair, and facial hair. The poster with the hand on the wall was an homage to the Franco Nero picture The Fifth Chord. In this sex scene, the bottle of wine was custom made. The label says Giallo. The ending where Porphyry is trapped in the film is an homage to The Beyond. For the car chase, they bought two old cars that barely ran. They fixed the cars just enough to run, and then they smashed them into each other in the car chase. For their finale, they put rocks on the gas pedals and let the cars drive off a cliff. The chainsaw was real, and they were extra careful since the actor was swinging it around and running it very close to Sweeney. There was another scene where they held the chainsaw close to Brooks's face. He looks worried because he was. It was all extremely dangerous. As for the scene with the scissors, it's really Sam's arm holding it above her own face. That way she had complete control over it. The goop near the end was chocolate syrup. As a goof, they often had weird things going on during dialogue-heavy scenes. Here everyone's eating a hamburger, although not Ray, because he's always an outcast. In the same scene, the girls in the background are playing patty cake. Filming was a stressful and complicated matter. They lost actors and locations at the last minute. The Blackmagic camera they rented fried its own memory card, and they lost all the footage on it. While filming a car, they accidentally broke one of the very expensive ND filters they had on loan. Every day was a new set of challenges and problems, but that's all part and parcel with independent filmmaking. Pre-production for the film began in 2012. They continued filming on weekends and whenever they could from September 2013 to late May of 2014. Altogether, on and off, filming took about a year. Exhausted but happy to be finished, they moved into post. While working in post, they discovered the Red Epic camera they rented for Block 1 had multiple burnout pixels. Had they noticed while they were filming, they could have done something, but now it was too late. They learned the LED panels they invested in always had a green hue to them, whether they were set to yellow or blue color temperature, which made for a lot of difficult color correction since they were using the LED panels in combination with halogen Fresnels. The color in the film was very important because if you're familiar with Giallo, you know one of the biggest elements of the genre is the deep colors. For certain scenes where the cast ad-libbed, they had a hard time doing ADR because they had no audio to reference what they were saying. 99% of the fire in the film was real. When Jen was falling down, the fire was going out, so they added about 2 seconds of fake fire in post to make it look right and cover any gaps. They spent most of the summer editing, color timing, and sound mixing to have it ready for the Toronto International Film Festival in September. In the end, the whole thing cost about $160,000. It premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival in September of 2014 and was a big hit with the crowd. It went on to be nominated for numerous awards at various film festivals like the Boston Underground Film Festival, Chicago International Film Festival Fangoria Chainsaw Awards, and Fright Meter Awards. At the Fright Night Film Festival US, it won Best Musical Score. It won Best Film at La Semaine du Cinéma in Nice, France. After the festivals, it had a brief run at the Alamo Draft Houses across the US. While filming, they were approached by several foreign distributors, but they didn't like the offers they made and didn't accept any of them. About 2 months after the premiere, they were negotiating US distribution and were able to ink a deal with Shout Factory under their Scream Factory label. The movie was released on Blu-ray on September 8, 2015. While the directors are not entirely happy with the film, they are proud of it. It's just that looking at it in hindsight, there's about 100 things they would either improve or do differently. They all worked hard, and even though they did some less than smart things, their hearts were in the right place and they made a movie that looks like it cost way more than it did. After all was said and done, film distributions aren't the moneymaker they used to be for smaller productions, and as such, it took a while for them to break even. The group's forging ahead though, making the short Chow Boys, an American folktale, which was a hit at both Fantastic Fest in 2018 and Sundance in 2019. They hope to one day turn it into a full feature. They also released the comedy series Divorced Dad in 2018. Jeremy Gillespie and Steve Kostanski wrote and directed the sci-fi horror film The Void, which was one of my personal favorite films from 2017. The Void also references The Beyond. After The Void, Steven Kostanski directed the comedy horror film Leprechaun Returns, which was a direct sequel to the original. While the group made The Editor as a love letter to one of their favorite genres, the love affair is over. After spending over a year living in that world, this genre's lost its luster, and they're all a lot less interested in it. The Editor is an excellent homage to all things Giallo and Italian cinema. The only downside I can see is that people who aren't very versed in this genre will be lost as to why everything is so weird. One minute you're watching a movie about a guy losing his mind, and the next he's in an alternate dimension with space worms? It could be too much for the average moviegoer to take in, or even attempt to understand. What the gang at Astron 6 were able to do here is astonishing. When they ran out of money, they didn't give up. They worked tirelessly until the film was finished. That's incredibly admirable. Although I will say it's nuts that they did some of the more guerrilla-style filmmaking things, such as lighting themselves on fire or running cars off a cliff without proper stunt guys. It's dangerous, and I'm glad no one was hurt. Still, there is a certain risk you take with art, and while I don't recommend anyone do what they did, the end result did look great. For a film that cost about as much as the meal budget for some blockbusters, it looks outstanding. From the lighting, to the practicals, to the score, to the inventive ways they worked around the budget. Everything here shines bright. It comes very close to looking like some lost 70s film. If you're a fan of Giallo films and want to see one that takes almost every trope up to 11, check out The Editor.